Right now, our grief and our pain is being exploited. People are literally destroying Black and minority-owned businesses in our city. We are joining here to say we can't let this happen. We need for us to prioritize in getting justice for George Floyd, in reforming our police departments, and making sure that our communities are safe. I urge people, as things develop tonight, to stay home. We are hearing that there is the deployment of extra force. Although many of us have cautioned against having excessive force present in our communities, we realize that that is going to happen tonight. And so what we want to do is we want to minimize the loss of life. We don't want another George Floyd to happen. Far too long, our communities have found themselves in this position. What is happening today, what has happened the last couple of days in our city, is not an isolated situation. But what we have to remember is that we can't allow for the murder of an unarmed Black man killed by the police to go without notice. Every single fire set ablaze, every single store that is looted, every time our community finds itself in danger, it is time where people are not spending talking about getting justice for George Floyd and many of the lives that have been lost in our community. But I also want to be clear, because we have to remember what escalated this situation. The tear gas that was shot into the crowd of children and the disproportionate response. We keep finding ourselves again in these positions. So I realize that our frustrations are warranted. Our despair is justified. But today our priority needs to be to minimize harm. We can't let the violence committed against one Black man give way to more destruction. You can't say you care about Black lives and engage in fires that endanger Black lives. Our city is asking for justice. Our young people are asking for justice. Every single Black person in our communities is asking for justice. And as policymakers, we have to make sure we are working together at every single level to respond to that. So I know that our governor and the mayors of both Minneapolis and St. Paul are engaging in a response to what is taking place in our communities. But for those of us who are policymakers, it is our job to acknowledge the problem and its historic roots. That is why myself and my colleagues on a federal level are introducing a resolution that acknowledges the systematic targeting of and use of deadly and brutal force against Black people and people of color. And that marginalized communities are significantly more likely to be criminalized and targeted by police violence. The resolution calls for an end of militarized policing practices and the adoption of unbiased law enforcement policies. I am working also to establish an independent federal agency with the responsibility and authority to investigate all officer-involved shootings and uses of force that result in death and severe bodily injury. This will be an agency that would be on call for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And lastly, we have to answer the calls of our communities. This is happening in the backdrop of a pandemic, a public health crisis, and an economic crisis. So we must make sure that we are not throwing more money at an ineffective police tactics. Any federal COVID-19 relief fund awarded to the city or state that are not specifically earmarked by Congress for law enforcement should not be allocated to the purchase of police swab bins or cover police revenue losses. At all stages, we must continue to prioritize justice. That is what every single protester that has been out in our city and across our nation has been asking for. But today we're also asking for people to prioritize safety. From the first day this began, I have been asking for a community-centered solution to de-escalation. And today we finally are deploying that response. I'm going to let Jeff Hayden and Ray Dean talk about what is taking place in our community, where we are saying we are not only going to clean up and start the process of rebuilding our city, but we are also going to join together tonight and to police our communities to make sure that those who are hell-bent on creating crisis in our city and burning it down don't win. Because my children's lives and every single person who lives in this city deserve for their lives to be protected. And when we say we are willing to die in order to have liberation, we must recognize that that's what the life of George speaks to. His life must get us full liberation and take us to freedom that creates equality for all of us in this country.
When you talk about outsiders wanting to come in and damage the city, just talk about the credible threats you've heard of or the credible reports. What is the proof that we have, if you want to walk us through some of it, showing that?
So that should be a question that it should be put to the governor and the mayors of the city and law enforcement. That is for them to investigate and litigate and make the case for it. What we do know is that we have found ourselves in this situation many a times in Minneapolis. We have one of the worst racial disparities in the country. We have had police brutality impact our communities over and over again for generations. We have taken it to the streets. We have protested time and time again. Nothing like this has ever taken place in our city. And so when we say these are people that are outside, we mean these are not the people who have, for time and time again, asked for reforms, for time and time again, came out to protest, from time and time again, asked for justice, from time and time again, held us accountable. This is not our people. And so when organizers organize protests, they put in place mechanisms to protect one another, to protect our communities, to center our communities' voices. And when we see the kind of destruction that is taking place in our streets, we know those are not our organizers. We know those are not our protesters. We know those are not the people who are grieving the lives that have been taken from our community. Because we all know that we have collectively fought for business development to take place on Lake Street. Every single meeting that Ray and Jeff and I have been in has been to invest in minority-owned businesses in our communities, to develop this corridor and make our community a more equitable one. So when you see a destruction to one of the most valued business corridors for minority communities in Minneapolis being destroyed, you know those are not minorities that are doing that destruction. And so I wanted to make it clear. When we say outsiders, I don't care whether that people understand it to mean that it is people from outside of Minneapolis or not. What we mean those are not our people. Those are not the people who are grieving in the ways that we are grieving. Those are not the people who are interested in helping get justice for George Floyd. Those are not the people who are interested in making sure that our communities continue to thrive. Those are not the people who are feeling the pains of African American mothers in our community. These are not the people who are living with the fears that I live with on what to happen with my son. If you care, again, about Black lives, you cannot set a fire in Minneapolis risking Black lives. I don't know how more clear we can say that. We can be angry, we can ask for justice, we can protest, we can take it to the streets, we can blow up the phones of the people that represent you, but what we cannot do is start a fire that can take lives.
Some of us are really scared. I know the curfew has the assumption that you're safe inside of your house. And for many that may be the case, but for the people that live in this area the past 4 nights, our fear has been, are we going to be burnt down inside of our buildings while we leave? We're tired of explaining to our children what's going on outside. And last night, many people in this building had to evacuate in the middle of the night. What is there some guarantees for us that if we remain in our house, that we will not be burnt alive?
I mean, your fear is understood, and that was the fear that came through last night, as people took it to Twitter, as people called our offices, our personal cell phones. Most of us have not slept, and because of that. And we are also, besides having that presence, working on really doing community policing. We are asking people to stay inside, but we want our communities to also step up and be vigilant. Ray and I were just talking about, we're going to be in North Minneapolis tonight. We're going to walk the streets. We're going to try to make sure people are safe. And I know Jeff did that last night, and I'm sure, I'm not going to put him on the spot, but he's probably going to do that tonight. Every single neighborhood association here has put out a plan for them to do that. We've had enough. Our communities will not be terrorized. And so we are asking for help in being vigilant and keeping one another protected and staying safe.